Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for our Ignite Azure Scaling Show series. My name's Anna, I'll be your producer for this session. I'm an event planner for Reactor, joining you from Redmond, Washington. Before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional, and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters and hosts to answer. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Reactor channel. With that, I'll turn it over to our host and presenter for the day. Thanks so much for joining.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today. Thank you, Anna, for the welcome. My name is Aaron Stark. I'm super excited to be here. I am a developer skilling lead here at Microsoft on the Azure Solutions Marketing team. And I work with all of our incredible experts here who have joined us to go over everything that includes modernization and migration for skilling. More specifically, we'll be talking about new capabilities that have come out, how we can help you guys understand how to actually adopt them. And we've got some fun goodies to go through. But before we jump in, I'm joined today by two experts who've been deep in this launch, who've been deep in everything as it relates to migration and modernization, Windows serverless SQL. And so wanted to hand it over to Bob and Aaron to introduce themselves.
Oren, go ahead.
My name's Aaron Thomas. I am a principal hybrid cloud advocate. I have written way too many books. Most of them have been on Windows Server, but a couple of them have been on SQL Server. What about you, Bob?
Hey, thanks, Oren. My name is Bob Ward. I'm a principal architect in the Azure data engineering team focusing on SQL. I was proud to celebrate my 32nd year at Microsoft in October, all working on SQL technologies. So to be a part of talking about the next version of SQL Server as part of this modernization strategies is a pleasure. So great to be here today, Aaron Norton.
Super, super excited. I mean, I was actually at Ignite a couple of weeks ago, and I know that there's been a lot of chats, a lot of things that are happening with this new launch of SQL Server 2025. So I'd love to know if you can just tell us everything that's new.
Great. Yeah, let me share my screen here and show you a little bit something I built. And I showed this at Ignite to an audience. I did a breakout session there. I call this my visualization slide of SQL Server 2025. And it starts with this tagline underneath the release, is that we're the AI-ready enterprise database. So there's a lot of databases out there today that claim that they have AI technologies like vectors, but we're the enterprise one, right? Because SQL have trusted SQL Server for so long for security and performance. So if you look at the top boxes right there, that's like the areas of innovation. So AI being built in, which I can't wait to tell you about that today. The best release for developers in a decade, and integration with the new Microsoft Fabric platform for this unified concept called mirroring. And then in the middle, right there in between that shiny new blue logo that we have at SQL Server for Microsoft, is security, performance, and availability, like mission critical engine. We have to make sure we always innovate there. And then kind of at the bottom, we're all powered by Arc technologies connecting to Azure, no matter where you're running. We have managed instance disaster recovery for you using Azure. We have new Management Studio 2022. We have millions of people using this tool. Optimized for SQL 25 with a GitHub Copilot. Benchmarks that we've released to show how great price performant we are. And then people don't realize this. We run everywhere. We run on Azure, Linux, containers, Kubernetes, obviously Windows Server, Azure Local, anywhere you need it, SQL exists. So Aaron, the excitement at Ignite was crazy. I had a packed audience. Been super great feedback from us all about what we're doing with SQL 25.
So Bob, I reckon a lot of the people in our audience will probably be running an older version of SQL Server, probably on-prem, probably sitting on Windows Server, a version of Windows Server. If they're running, let's say, SQL 2016 or 2019, what would they be looking at in terms of, for example, the AI stuff? What would be relevant to them for their existing workloads? Let's say that they're not looking at a new workload. Let's say they're looking at an existing thing that they've already got in production. Why would they be looking at SQL 25 and going, that's where I need to go?
Yeah, makes sense, totally. And several customers go through this period of time with their release of SQL Server to decide, should I upgrade, should I not? It could be based on the life cycle of how they just upgrade their releases. It could be end of support coming up. Could even be just they're upgrading hardware they have on premises, or maybe a new Azure VM in the cloud, and they're thinking about upgrading. The cool thing about this release is there are plenty of new features that will be for like new apps, like AI being built in. There's plenty of functionality that just exists to help just make you better, more secure, faster, more available without changing code. So if you're thinking like, oh, what's the value prop for me? It's the fact that I can make that move to SQL 25. And let's check this out, folks. No pricing or licensing changes. So I get more from what I had by making that move with no increase in price and no licensing change, and even increasing limits for things like standard edition. So there's a lot of great value just core to the release itself.
Could you tell me a bit, actually, just as you brought up different editions there, I think you've got a great slide that's going to tell me a bit more about that. Can you talk me through about what's going on with the editions? Because when I was reviewing the Ignite content, I saw that there was a fair degree of interest, one might say, in what's going on with the SQL editions with SQL 25.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for asking, Oren. I mean, again, no pricing and licensing change, first of all. Second of all, the fact that we bumped up limits for standard edition, more cores, more memory, more features. We didn't specifically put features like AI only in enterprise. They exist in standard. We have a new standard version of developer edition, so you can develop and test for free as it acts like standard. One of the biggest, greatest, quite frankly, positive reaction we have for this release was what you just said, is the editions themselves. So it's almost like just giving you a lot more value for what you have. And if you want to stay on standard, that's great. We give you more value for it.
Do you have that slide you showed?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Okay. We're just going to live here, flip over down here in this deck to show you this edition slide. Where is that one? Yeah, right here, Oren. Look, we're just doing PowerPoint on the fly, right? There you go. Yeah, look at all the red. The red is not bad. The red is good. It's like new stuff. So even SQL Express gets a bump up on things. But anything you see on the left applies to the middle and to the right. So, standard has just been that great story for us. And so many great new things come with it. Quite frankly, our decision on standard was this. Hardware has evolved and changed, but the limits for standard have not. So we need to bump those things up so standard still becomes something that's affordable for you, but meets the needs of what you're doing with today's hardware. So pretty excited about what we've done in this area.
So if you were speccing out, say, a machine just to run, say, standard edition, what would you be thinking of as your standard machine now for running the standard version of SQL 25?
Well, think about modern servers, even for the standard type customers, they've moved to higher number of cores, right? More CPUs per core, more memory available with very affordable price ranges, right? So, why wouldn't I not take advantage of that? Because quite frankly, as a standard customer, my needs of my data have increased. The size of my data, number of users have increased. So I want to make sure that those limits that we've now pushed up to 24 to 32 now for cores, 128, 256, want to make sure that all of that can meet the needs of today's standard user.
Now, certainly in the Windows Server space, we have essentially the standard edition, and then we have Data Center edition. And the Data Center edition's got a couple of things that make absolute sense for a very specific set of work cases. Does the same thing really apply with SQL Server? Is it 99% of customers or 95% of customers are going to be fine on standard, but that there's going to be very specific customers that need enterprise, or is it there a larger number that need those features in enterprise?
Yeah, I would say the mix is a little different. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like 95%, but we do have customers running very mission critical applications that need the highest core counts, the highest memory counts. They need the query processor and the engine to scale at really large numbers of users. So enterprise is still a great fit for that. And this is why it's called enterprise, right? So yeah, we still have that need. We still see a lot of customers love that option. And the fact that they get all the new features as well is a great part of it. So
you mentioned earlier sort of improvements around security performance, high availability, disaster recovery. So let's drill down on what the security improvements are. So if you were just going to say, look, you want to be, we always tell our customers, go and run the latest version of our software because we know that that's the most secure version, right? Because it's the most recent version of the code base. But specifically, what are the benefits for security for, on the SQL side of SQL 25.
Jordan, thanks for asking. So first of all, I want to throw this at you because a lot of people saw us focus on AI, which I'd love to get a chance to talk about that obviously at some point. But look at the slide. I mean, you've got some 40 plus new features for the engine itself across security, performance, and availability. And I call that the meat and potatoes of SQL Server. It's like the core engine of the product, right? So we've got tons of features across all these areas. And if you look at security, you can just see the list here. But the number one thing people have asked us to do is to make sure we're more integrated with Untra. So look at this diagram. If you take a SQL Server and use Arc Connect to Azure, that could be running on-prem in a different cloud, wherever you want to be. You want to get extra value. Well, what are you going to get from that? Well, we introduced in SQL 2022 Entra security support, but that was all inbound, like connecting and logging in for like multi-factor authentication. Well, we've added to that for inbound for managed identity support now with SQL 25, but now we offer it outbound, which means is if you're going to connect SQL to say back up to Azure storage or use a new AI model from Microsoft Foundry with us, you can now secure that with a managed identity and go passwordless. So that alone is probably the number one thing in security we've offered to our customers in this release.
So, and just to sort of translate for those who aren't entirely conversant with what the idea of managed identity is, if you're thinking about it, you can think about it in the old way of saying it's sort of like having a computer account or an application account. So, for example, if you've got resources that are sitting in the cloud, rather than using, say, a shared access signature or an access token that might be sitting in source code, which makes it a lot less secure, what you're doing is you're basically saying, right, I'm giving this application a representation as an identity within Entra, or Entra, as I'd say with my accent.
Yeah, I know, I don't say it right either.
And then when I've given it that access, what I can do is I can restrict permissions like I would to, say, a normal user account. So I can say, rather than worrying about the authentication going through these very traditional methods of using shared access signatures or access token or access keys, I can say, right, I'm going to give permission to this identity, and this identity will be the SQL instance because my computer is Arc enabled and might be sitting on-prem, but I'm giving it access to something in the cloud. So that's just a sort of, when we talk about managed identity, sometimes we skip over the bits about where that actually makes sense to you. And the reason it makes sense is you want to get away in your code from hard coding these things, these identity keys and things like that, because that's one of the areas we see the most breaches. When attackers come in, what they do is they go and get access keys, and they use those access keys to go and wreak havoc. Whereas if you're using sort of the identity as your security control plane, what you're doing is then you're really limiting it. And the identity, it's not the passwords, but functionally, passwords get updated, synchronized. It makes it a lot harder for that bridge that you've created between your SQL instance and whatever resources you're running in the cloud to be compromised.
Yeah, I'm really trying to convince our customers to go passwordless, as you say, like strings, tokens, things like that nature. Managed identity provides that easy way to do that. So that's one of the value adds when I mentioned earlier about using Arc. So Arc, your SQL Server, connected and get this type of capability. That's really the hero security part of our release.
And I think that's going to be something that's going to take a long time, because it's historically in technology, once we've figured out how to solve a problem, we get very reluctant on wanting to solve it again, especially if it seems to make it a little more complicated. And sort of organizations will always need to try and figure out what the trade-off is about sort of re-engineering their applications to use these newer identity technologies versus going, well, mate, this works. This is the way we've always done it. And even though we do understand that this makes it a little less secure, in terms of the risk, we consider our risk profile, we're just going to stick with what's been working for us for the last few decades.
Right.
Okay, so that's security. Let's talk about what the performance benefits are in terms of running SQL 25 versus previous editions.
Sure.
Sorry.
First of all, I want to look and see, Aaron, is there any questions out there maybe we should take a look at?
Yes, just want to jump in really quick. I see a question there from Jackie Wynn that says, does SQL Server 2025 have capabilities to put in images in the SQL syntax like SQL in Snowflake?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what that question means. So, as far as SQL syntax compatibility, SQL Server itself follows the ANSI standard. So, if you follow ANSI standard, our syntax follows during that. Our Transact SQL language obviously is an extension to that. So there are several T-SQL language constructs that don't exist in a product like Snowflake. But yeah, ANSI standard is certainly part of what we've always supported. So if you're thinking about writing T-SQL, it's going to work for either one. If you stick to ANSI standards, it's pretty compatible.
Anything from you, Aaron?
No. So, but one of the things that coming back to, I guess, before we get back into performance, one of the things that you talked about in the presentation at Ignite was the ability to basically use a lot more sort of. I was looking at it and I was thinking that you were using a lot more JSON code where you were sort of getting it to interact with SQL to interact, and certainly from the AI perspective. So maybe do you want to just riff on that for a minute or two?
Yeah, I love it. The good thing is I have everything in my deck, right? I can just go anywhere I need to. It's like programming on the fly. So yeah, let me show you that. Here's like a slide about developers, right? When you think about SQL syntax, and not only is there JSON support built into the engine, but look at this REST API concept. So, I'm trying to teach the database developer world that, you're not going to be lost in this world of AI because, and we'll talk about our vector support in a bit, but, we're providing a capability for you to do REST API programming in the engine. I know it sounds weird, but we have like system procedures that you can access in T-SQL, take your data and interact with things like AI models to build like AI agents and do it in the security blanket of SQL. I have a pretty cool demo. You can show it to you?
Yeah, sure. Go.
Yeah. So let me show you this right here. So imagine you got like this tablet in a healthcare clinic and you're trying to promote standards of care. So, if you've got a health professional there, they can take like the patient vitals information, put in this like symptom, hit like generate care plan, and that could actually bring back a very detailed plan of how to go treat the patient. And you want to promote standards of care when doing it, though, but you want to make it very generative, and you don't have to go do a lot of research to bring this together. So how do you do it? Well, this is a lot of T-SQL code, Oren. This is like an example where I can go build an AI agent using this stored procedure called, it's a very long name, but I'm literally doing REST API calls, and I'm going to send this REST API calls to a GPT model running on my machine if I want to, on premises. And so I can take this huge set of prompts that I'm going to put together, like prompt programming, add it to data from the database, patient vitals. I can do vector searching with patient symptoms, and I can get back this really interesting care plan in JSON format. And you're like, well, what does this really look like? Well, look at this. This is an example of actually calling one of these things. I'm going to go call with this medical information I got from the device, put in the symptom of their problems, and I have standards of care built in to go look at it. And when I run it, it comes back with this really, look at this thing. This is a very complex JSON document that can be fed back to the app. And all of this was done was using the power and combination of data in my database, data from the app, and information from an AI model that I gave instructions to. So I did this all in SQL. I didn't go and write a Python app or a Java app or anything. I did it inside the SQL engine itself. So I'm kind of unveiling a new story for server-side programming for database developers to write AI code or any type of REST endpoint you want from a service. So this got great excitement at Ignite from the development community and from the database developer community.
Well, it's definitely solving some of those problems that we've always had between the ways that different formats of data are stored in different ways and how you can get, this EDI, which has always been the problem sort of, 25 years ago, I was managing essentially a system, we know, get this database to talk to this database because they're talking about in different formats. And if I understand what you're saying, is you're saying, well, by moving it almost to getting these endpoints to talk together without having to go and put all the glue code in yourself, or at least doing the glue code in this way.
Imagine you writing a Python code to do this, right? You're going to write Python code to go call a REST endpoint. You're going to go get data from your database, bring it back to your app, call the REST endpoint with your data, get the result and format it, or maybe call an AI model. I can do it all in the engine. I just call a stored procedure. So I'll build a stored procedure. The app just calls the procedure. The stored procedure has security, scalability, everything you need. That does it all in the engine. And the AI model can be hosted anywhere you want. It can be hosted on your local machine, on a network, in a cloud, wherever you want to do it. and you've now built like an AI program in SQL Server. So it's pretty cool.
Okay, so we just got a question in the chat, and
I see Jackie's question. They asked, it was more of a detail on the question before on Snowflake. They allow users to attach an image to a SQL script was, I think, the question, right? So
yeah.
I said the question. So yeah, I mean, SQL, I'm not sure if this is what you mean, Jackie, but SQL supports all sorts of native types, including var binaries, images, text, whatever. So you can absolutely do this. You can actually take information from an image and put a SQL script together and access it and put it in the engine itself. So that's all possible because we support all those data types. So I think that you can find will be, I don't know exactly how Snowflake does it, but I'm sure we would support the same type of thing given our data type support.
And there's another question. Essentially, this question, and I understand the reasoning, but the question is essentially, look, you've taken SQL Server Management Studio and decoupled it from SQL Server. Now, I understand because why we've done that, but maybe you'll talk to why we have decoupled SQL Server Management Studio from the database engine itself.
It's a great question, Oren, and Jackie, thanks for asking that. And we made a very conscious decision a few years ago to do this, and here's why. We found that if we put it with the engine itself, and the only place we put it, we can only iterate an SSMS when we release a new version of SQL Server, which is like every couple of years, right? Plus, we wanted just this ability to make sure it's just a standalone complete thing you could do on your own. So we made this decision. I think it's proven very popular with all our SSMS customers because we can iterate on this thing monthly. In fact, Oren, this is crazy, but even this year, we announced not just one, but two versions of SSMS. SSMS 21 in May and a new version just at Ignite 22. So I think we're going to stick with this standalone package approach. It's seemed to be very popular. We have a new installation, by the way, a brand new installer. This is another thing allows us to make it separate. We have a new installer with Visual Studio Installer with that great experience they provide for updates and installation. So decoupling it there, it provides this great benefit of giving a much better installation update experience. I'm a major SSMS fan and user myself, and I love the new update install experience. It's night and day with what we had before.
I use Winget, so I'm just one of those Winget install that and then Winget update, and I just let it go that. But it's interesting that question comes up. But yes, I've always understood it's like essentially this allows us to iterate the management studio without you back to the installation media like we had to in the old days and put the installation media in and then go and install SQL Server Management Studio. Now we can talk.
I think it makes sense. I know audience is sitting back going, you said AI built in. I think we should show them, man. We should show them how AI is built in. What do you think?
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, so back to the roving slide deck. And I've got a slide at the end, Oren, to show people how to get all this information. Oren, did you know in my slides, all the demos are built in. You can just do them yourself, right? So
yeah, look, that's a pretty gutsy move. I always put them as separate video files because, I don't trust.
All in the deck, so you can just play them. If you unmute them, you can hear them. You can take a nap on a Sunday and listen to me drone on about this, right? So, hey, let me tell you what we're doing with AI built in. We are trying to provide just better searching for you. So you can now search your text data in the database engine using AI models. We call it vector searching. So if you've heard of the term vector store, we are now a vector store inside SQL Server. Why is that important? Because you're going to use the power of the SQL Server engine you already trust. That's that enterprise store of AI ready. The security, the scalability, everything you have, and the T-SQL language, and all do it in the engine. So I just showed you that care plan demo. When you put in that little symptom to get the results back, that was a vector search we did inside the engine. So let me show you what this looks like. I think it's pretty important to kind of know what are these icons and how does this even work, right? So let's say you have a company called AdventureWorks that has a kiosk like in a store for like bicycles, right? And your stores are both in the US and France. So you need to build a multi-language app, but you want to build multiple apps to do it. So look at this. Who can search for gliding, pillowy feel in their database today? You can do that. Like full text search for SQL breaks down, like clauses. You just can't search with natural language. What we can do is allow customers to go in and put this like search criteria and come back with relevant results and even do this in multiple languages. We can do it all in the database, all to T-SQL, all secured, and you don't have to write separate apps to do it. So here's the cool thing, Oren. I showed it at Ignite. I can do it in 5 steps. This is how easy this is. So I'm using Management Studio, just talking about it. And I'm showing you first, what does it look like when you use full text search? Remember this pillow, a zero buzz. This is the lingo of bicycle people, right? People that write it professionally or write it, in a way that they love doing bike riding. I'm just a casual bike rider. So these type of searches cannot be done today in SQL Server. But if I follow these steps, I can do it. First, this is what we call a model definition. We're not going to load an AI model in SQL Server. You're going to go deploy it like with a llama, maybe on your server on a network somewhere. You can then define in T-SQL, where does the model exist, which is called an embedding model. Where's the host endpoint? And we use HTTPS, and so it's all secure, it's encrypted to contact them. And this is all configured and enabled. It's off by default. So admins have to go configure the ability to even use this functionality. So get that model definition built. We'll store the metadata in SQL Server. That's step like number one. So when you do that, what do you do now? Because I just have this definition. Well, we're going to use T-SQL for you to go in and take data in your database and store what's called a new vector type. It's like a series of floating point numbers. No one knows what these numbers mean, but AI models do. And the numbers have semantic meaning to your text data, like product descriptions. So we can go in with a simple insert select statement and generate these numbers from the definition we already had. The model defines the numbers, gives us the numbers. We put in this binary floating point format. And you're like, well, great. I got a bunch of floating point numbers. I don't know what to do with this thing. Well, what you're going to do next is create an index. Everything in SQL is an index, right? So you're going to create what's called a disk ANN index on top of your vectors, which is going to give us much more faster searching on top of all these things, especially if you have a lot of them. And the index is pretty small, actually, because it's a graph pointing to all these numbers. Now, notice here that you're not even an AI expert at this point. You've just created a model definition somewhere. You've done an insert select statement. You've created an index. Now what you're going to do is this. Go build, again, here's store procedures. Build a procedure that'll take a natural language prompt, like that pillowy feel thing. Take it in as an input from the app. Use like stock levels to do a hybrid search. Then in the procedure, generate an embedding number using T-SQL with the prompt. So you have a number for the prompt, a set of numbers for the prompt, and numbers in your database. Well, I don't want to do the math for it. Use our vector search function. You bring the model, we do the math. So we are going to use vector search to find the most similar result by these numbers because it's the closest distance between them. And the model helps us do that. And because we're SQL Server, you can put a hybrid where clause around it. Now, what do you do? How do we build results for you like that app I showed you in the kiosk? Well, I'll call the stored procedure. And I will punch in that same thing that came in from the app with stock level 100, like minimum 100s. There you go. There's your results. Now, in this case, what I found interesting was I got some French results for an English prompt. Now, the French prompt gave me back French results. So I'm pretty excited because I didn't build a separate app, but I've got a multi-language AI searching capability. But I need to solve that French problem of getting back English. I discovered that I'm using a model that is not multi-language optimized. So here's what I did. This is crazy. I just switch over to Azure now to Microsoft Foundry. I'll switch and use a different model in the cloud that is optimized for multi-language. It could be one on premises that I could find, but I'm just going to use one in Azure here. Look at the similarity to this. It looks just the one I did before, but it's in Azure. I regenerate my embeddings. In this case, my vector dimensions had to be larger to support this new model I'm using. It's the same type of code, though. A vector type, an insert select, the same type of process. Go build a vector index. The same process I did, that 5-step process, is the same, but with just a different model. So because I have new embeddings, I'll generate a new index. I'll make sure that my procedure supports the new model in Azure. This is all, by the way, can use managed identity to connect to that model if I want to. Now the results are better. All in English, back from the prompt from English, all the results in French, back from the prompt in French. We are allowing people to build complex searching systems using AI models in a very secure and scalable way, natural to them because we're using T-SQL. The impression I've got back from customers is, I'm not sure, but then they see these examples, are like, man, I got to go look at this stuff. Because I know T-SQL, I can do it myself. It's pretty amazing.
And one of the things that I don't think we've communicated very well, and I'll come back to it as a Windows Server person, is that you can run using our own version, which is Foundry Local, or Olama, and they basically look the same to when you're trying to get SQL to talk to them. You can run open source or freely available models. You can run that on your own hardware. So if you're sitting there going, well, I don't know that I want to spin up all of those credits in Azure, but if I've got a juicy box sitting on-prem that's got some great GPUs in it, I can go and run this model on-prem on Windows Server. Linux obviously supports it as well, but I'm a Windows Server guy, so I'm going to point out that Windows Server supports hosting Olama, and it also supports hosting Foundry Local, which is the Microsoft version. All you do then is you select the model that is appropriate for your particular what the hardware is that you've got, and then you can run that. Because one of the things that people aren't necessarily they don't clock onto with AI is they sit there and go, wow, I need an Azure-sized data center to run AI. And the reality is, no, you don't. You need an Azure-sized data center to train AI, but to actually run it, you can run models on your phone. So you can run the models that are sitting as a back end to your SQL Server database, either locally on a Windows Server instance or on another Windows Server instance sitting on the same virtualization cluster. So one of the other things that we were going to talk about was this idea of performance. And I'll come back to, I don't know if you've got the slide I had about the Windows Server, the benefits of running on Windows Server 25, because when we talk about SQL Server, as Bob pointed out, you can run SQL Server anywhere. You can run it in a container, in Azure, the whole 9 yards. But traditionally, when I got started in the 90s, it was a SQL Server sitting on Windows NT. And there's always been this sort of paired relationship between Windows Server and SQL Server. So the benefits to running Windows Server 25, why you might want to sit there and upgrade, when you're thinking of going to SQL 25, why you want to think about using Windows Server 25 as your platform, is all of these improvements that are going to make your SQL instance run better. For example, NVMe storage. Essentially, you're getting 60% higher IOPS with lower CPU utilization, up to 30% lower CPU utilization during intensive read-write operations, which means that your database engine can be doing a lot more of the processor CPU stuff rather than sort of sitting there waiting for the storage subsystem to get on with doing what it wants to do. There's also reduced storage latency. And people sit there and go, well, why is Windows Server important in this context? Remember that a lot of the foundational technologies of Azure are sitting on top of Hyper-V, and a lot of the technologies that come down into Windows Server are stuff that we've battle tested over in Azure. Another thing that is relevant, and this is relevant to this conversation that we just had about running AI locally, is that Windows Server allows you to do GPU partitioning on your virtualization workloads. So what that means is you can go and get a big chunky GPU, and then you can basically, if you've got a bunch of VMs in a cluster, you can assign partitions of that GPU to individual VMs. So you can decide how much GPU, instead of going, well, I've got this, $30,000 GPU, I can only assign it to one VM. You might go and assign it to 4 VMs or 8 VMs. Another one that I want to bring up is this idea of hot patching. If you've got Windows Server on-prem Arc enabled, or you're running it in Azure Local, or you're running it in Azure, but all you have to do is turn on Arc enabled if it's just running sort of on bare metal, is that you've got hot patching. And hot patching in Windows Server 25 means that you only need to reboot once a quarter, because what we've done is we've taken away the requirement of rebooting every time you apply a software update. And we saw, in terms of rolling out patches, the Xbox team, which used to take like 3 weeks to roll out patches for some of their back-end services, so they were doing that every month, they got that down to being able to run 2 months, 2 months out of every 3. They were able to do their entire update management thing in less than 48 hours. You need close to accounts sitting there. And the final sort of thing is the security. Windows Server 25, just like SQL Server 25, is the most secure version of Windows Server. It integrates with Active Directory, it integrates with Entra, and it's got new stuff like OS Config, which is essentially a tool that you can run either directly from PowerShell or from Windows Admin Center that will allow you to basically look at all of the policy settings and the recommended security settings, and it'll tell you if it's turned on or not, so you can do a security audit, or you can just go and apply that template. So I'm sure at some point there'll probably be config versions of, essentially one of the benefits of turning on policy is that you can also go and audit your SQL Server configuration. So having said all of that about Windows Server, what are the benefits in performance of SQL 25?
Well, let me also comment, Orrin, before we go back, because I know we jumped around a little bit, and I definitely want to talk about performance. Let me just comment here real quick for customers, for users on here, looking like, how is SQL involved here? We benefit from everything here, right? So look at GPUs. We talked about using models for SQL Server, right? You're going to benefit from that. But Orrin, all the vector searching I showed, that happens all CPU based. So once you've generated your embeddings, everything we do for vector searching, you're going to benefit from CPU and storage because you're going to store all these things, right? Hot patching is going to benefit us because if you have to patch your Windows Server less, SQL is up longer, right? And then finally for security, we talked about Entra. So I think SQL plays a key role in combining together these great Windows Server features. But yeah, let me go back here and show you that perf slide. And this is something you and I were talking about that's very, very important. And that is this. If you're running Windows Server 25, if you've got hardware updates you're making, you want to make sure you're scalable. The one thing you don't want to have is the SQL Server slowing you down, right? So from left to right, we've got a couple interesting things. Number one, man, developers are so tired of how SQL behaves internally for locking behavior, things like lock escalation. Like, I don't have to worry about it anymore. So we said earlier on, you asked me, like, if I was going to upgrade, what is really cool for me to consider without having to make a lot of changes? This on the left is it. With just database configuration changes, no code changes, I can be much more concurrent. And I think people think in terms of performance as just like query performance, but the more concurrent you are, the faster you are, right? Because concurrency slows down even the fastest queries. So optimized locking is a way just to make you run faster because you're more concurrent. In the middle, this is like a protection for those who want to ensure that rogue queries don't bring the server down. So you can actually set a hint in the SQL Server engine. So if some query is bringing your server down, you can force it to like error out so it won't cause more problems for your server. And this concept of tempDB sometimes can have servers, run out of control with space. So now we can kind of sandbox users to only use a set of space for temporary tables and even internal tables that they just didn't have before. This is a really great story here because, again, it's all built in the engine, no code required, but gives you a lot of flexibility to keep your server up and running and well performant.
Okay, so one of the other things that we've talked about is obviously upgrading to SQL 25. And there's a good reason that you need to upgrade to SQL 25, which is that SQL 2016 is at some point in the future, and you can tell me when, going to reach end of support.
Yeah, next year, next summer. So SQL 16 will be end of support next year, 2026, right? Yeah.
So on this slide here, what I've done is I've put together sort of all of the versions of SQL Server and Windows Server. And, if you're running SQL Server 2016, that is not actually fully supported on Windows Server 2025 at the moment. I think it's SQL 2019 and beyond. So if you're sitting on SQL, but if you're sitting on Windows Server, say 2019, you can go all of the way in terms of performing an in-place upgrade if you'd want to do that to SQL Server 25, and then you can perform an in-place upgrade of your operating system platform after that. Is there any sort of recommendation that you've got or gotchas and things to watch out for? Because we've got, my feeling is we've got to the stage where it's doing SQL upgrades that it's, press button, get upgrade. Is there more to think about it than that, other than making sure you've got a good damn backup of everything before you start pressing the button?
Yeah, a couple thoughts here. Number one, just on the SQL side alone, first of all, for SQL 25, we will support an in-place upgrade of SQL all the way back to SQL 14. So if you're on SQL 14, even there, you want to upgrade to SQL 25, you can do that. And this is crazy, Orrin. If you want to restore a database, you can do it all the way back to 2008. So you can take a database, back it up on SQL 2008, and restore it in 25. You can't do it in place, but we call that a migration strategy. So that exists for SQL alone. But if you're in this combination like you talked about now, I've definitely found customers more successful by upgrading the operating system first, for sure. By doing that in-place script with OS and then SQL running on top of that, and then try to figure out a way to do SQL. But I realize if you're way past, way in an older version on Windows and SQL as well, you may have to consider not doing an in-place upgrade and setting up an entire new server and then doing restore backups or however you want to do at that point. But there are definitely a lot of options on this slide you can see here to do. We try to be very carefully thinking. When we built the strategy for SQL 25 at least, we were thinking in our mind about the SQL 16 users that have into support for next year. We want to give you all the options you needed.
Yeah, one of the things that I always try and remind people, and this comes down even into a migration conversation, is that your DR plan means that you need to be able to rebuild this anyway. If you're, in the old days, it used to be our bare metal, and our bare metal would do a firework, and then you got to go and get the new bare metal and then go and restore from that, or you get the bloke out with the new motherboard, and then you've got to go and replace the motherboard and everything like that. Now everything's running in VMs. We've got to get lazy in terms of the way that we do upgrades, which is sometimes doing a migration is just doing a DR rebuild and then bringing it up to date. So we've got a question from Jack, and Jack said, what's an in-place upgrade? Well, the easiest version of talking about that is basically you start the installation and it detects that it's running, that SQL's already running, and saying, do you want to upgrade rather than do you want to do a clean install? Is that a fair way of representing it?
Yeah, you basically can use a process with the software to say upgrade in place, like just upgrade the software on the machine itself. Obviously, Oren, we always recommend customers to back up everything they have before they go through this process, whether it's Windows or SQL itself. But yeah, without having to actually go put it on a different server somewhere, you run the actual installation software for the new version and say, I want to upgrade what I have in place.
So Jack's come back and said, look, I've got Windows Server 2012 R2 as my host, and I'm running SQL 2014 and 2016. Okay, so your problem there is where you're starting with is that Windows Server 2012 R2 is out of support unless you're paying for extended security updates. So the first thing you want to do is get off that. Now, what you can't do, in theory, you could do, but it's unsupported, an in-place upgrade of Server 2012 straight to Server 25. But what you're probably going to have to do is play a bit of Hoppy Frog, right? And Hoppy Frog is that you're going to need to get onto a supported version of Windows Server. Now, you can go straight, do an in-place upgrade of 2012 R2 to 2016, and that'll give you a supported version of Windows Server. That will then allow you to come back and address your SQL instances, and then you might want to bump your SQL instances up to SQL 25. And then once you've got your SQL instances bumped up to 25, you can then go and do the in-place upgrade of Windows Server 2016, which doesn't reach end of support for a little while yet. And then you can go from 2016 to 25 in one install.
Yeah, and I would just comment my personal experience. Number one, please, any kind of in-place upgrade you're trying, make sure it's supported, right? Because if you get in a situation where something fails in the middle, you need help from Microsoft, you need to be in that supported state. So honestly, for all the hops you talked about, Oren, I think an in-place upgrade might be tough for Jack. I think you probably need to have a new, fresh version of installation and make a migration over. That could be a new VM, right? For example, you would do. So I think by the time you do all those hops, you probably could have just done a new one and migrated over. Probably be easier. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting in the way that the people approach it, because I say the same thing with Active Directory. I'm sitting there thinking, why don't you just put a new domain controller, transfer all your roles across, move to the new domain controller, decommission the other one. But there's often all of these weird little things that are going on in organizational inventories and politics and things like that, which mean, yeah, mate, we'd love to do it the sensible way, but we don't work in a sensible organization, so we've got to do it the merry-go-round way.
Aaron,
hey there, guys. Yes, no, thank you guys for the very lively discussion. Thank you for the comments and the questions in the chat today. I know we're almost coming up at time. So just wanted to, before we kind of end everything, yes, if there's a slide that we can see for all of the resources and maybe just a little bit of an overview of what you guys are most excited about in this.
Aaron, look at all this stuff. That's crazy. I mean, so first of all, a great set of blogs. You see it. I'll just go like clockwise around. Like great set of blogs. We're gonna iterate and keep updating those blogs as we continue on the end of this year, next year. Here's how to get it already. Just go get Developer Edition today. We have really good documentation in our team. Here's a good one, Aaron. The deck I'm showing, and there's an expansion of that, is on that site. I'm an open source presenter. So we have decks for you already available. You can download and use, show it to your company, your user community. We've got demos in a GitHub repo for you. We have our feedback sites to tell us kind of what you think about it, but for SQL and SSMS, we have videos. We have a new learning module. There's like a challenge for you to go out there and get a badge and go through that entire learning path to learn about SQL 25. And here's how to get SSMS. But Aaron, I'm sorry, I have to do a plug for my book. So in the upper right-hand corner and behind me here is all the books. But yeah, it's my 6th book. It's so fun to write these. And it's called SQL 25 book. And it's really fun because in the first chapter, it's the history of how we built the product. I do a lot of interviews with members of the leadership and engineering team on how we built it. And then we go through all the stuff that Or and I just talked about in more depth. So we've got all the resources you need on how to get started with SQL 25. The popularity of this release is twice as what it was in SQL 2022. So we're very excited about how you learn how to run it on both, run it on Windows Server 25 together. But man, it's been a great journey and excited to see it land.
I won't get into a measuring competition about books, but I just finished my 47th.
47? Wow, I can't compete with that. So.
The other thing I want people who are listening to think about is you can go and get an eval version for free of Windows Server right now. You can run it in a VM. You can go over to akka.ms, get SQL Server. You can go and get a version of SQL Server and download it. And you can also go and download some sample databases so you can go and kick the tires in an eval version of this, sitting in a VM. And if you can do that on your laptop because Windows 11 includes client Hyper-V. So there's already a virtualization solution for you. All you need to do is go and throw a couple of gig of RAM at it, and then you can just start bashing away at it and have a look for yourself.
Awesome. I appreciate it, you two. Thank you again to our 2 experts who joined us today to talk about all things modernizing your future with Windows Server and SQL Server 2025. Like Bob and Orrin both mentioned, there's books, blogs, MS Learn challenge and content available. So really dive in, go and really participate. And this is but one episode of a series. So there's more to come. And if we hear really good feedback, this could be something we bring back. So thank you again. And yes, till next time. Bye, guys.
See ya.
Thank you all for joining, and thanks again to our speakers. This session is a part of a series. To register for future shows and watch past episodes on demand, you can follow the link on the screen or in the chat. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find that link on the screen or in the chat. And we'll see you at the next one.